So last week, as we were reading through Mark chapter 8, we could see how Peter seems to be trying to place Jesus into his box, his limits or line of thinking of who the Messiah is and who Jesus is and what the Messiah or what Jesus was supposed to accomplish. And so we can look back and get so frustrated with the disciples in this way, how their understanding was so limited and how we can be so frustrated that they just didn't get or see the big picture. Jesus says, you don't have the things of God in your mind, you have the things of man in mind. That's it. That's what you are thinking. You're not thinking in God's terms, you're thinking in your terms. And so as we look back at the disciples, and especially how Peter is portrayed throughout Mark, which we believe is Peter's own portrayal of himself. He's telling Mark these stories, and in all humility, and Mark is simply recording what is being written. And so we can get frustrated looking at Peter and the disciples and think, man, how did you just not get it? You walked and talked with Jesus, with the Son of God. You had that privilege and opportunity, and you missed it. You kept missing the mark. You just didn't get it. And you kept trying to put Jesus into this box. You kept trying to limit him and what he really was all about. To bend him into what you wanted him to accomplish rather than follow along and submit into what he was meant to accomplish. We can see throughout Mark that there's kind of two parts to the book. Most scholars agree that Mark, the first half of Mark, up to where we left off last week, kind of brings in who Jesus is. It introduces us to who he is as the Son of God. He's the Son of Man, the Messiah, that he's God himself by forgiving sins, that he's healer, that he's compassionate. It introduces us to who Jesus is. And then the latter half, starting with where we left off last week and continuing on through the rest of this series, kind of shows us what Jesus is here to do, what he's all about, what his mission is. And so we were introduced to who he is, and now to what he does and what he is here to accomplish. Those are how it's broken up. Now we can see in the later half where we get these reminders of who he is, but we can also see in the first half how it alludes to what he is called to do. But nonetheless, these more distinct definitions kind of help us to see the progression of Mark's story and how he's trying to help us to understand everything that's happening. And last week, Jesus introduced, here's why I'm here. Here's what it's all about. And he tells the disciples that he must be rejected, that he must suffer, that he must die, and that he must rise again. This is what he tells the disciples. That's where Peter entered in and rebuked Jesus, and Jesus was like, whoa, get behind me, don't tempt me. But this is what I'm actually here to do. You might get that I'm the Messiah, but don't put me in your box of what Messiah actually means. Now, to show the boys this, to show and help them understand really what it's all about, Jesus takes three of the disciples here in chapter 9, verse 2 is where we're starting today. Chapter 9, verse 2. And he takes three disciples and reveals to them something that even at the time they didn't understand. And I'm not even sure if they fully understood, as most things, until after the resurrection itself. But here he takes Peter, James, and John up a mountain by themselves. And we're in Mark chapter 9, verse 2. It says, after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, and he led them up a high mountain by themselves. and he was transfigured before them. And his clothes became radiant, intensely white, as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." For he did not know what to say, for they were terrified. And a cloud overshadowed them. And a voice came out of the cloud, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." And suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them, but Jesus only. So we see Peter once again open his mouth, but not before Jesus has this opportunity to reveal to him some amazing things, some inside secrets here that later on we'll see. Jesus even tells them, don't tell anybody about this until after the resurrection, after what I told you was going to happen last week. And so there's a couple things going on here. What we see is Jesus being transfigured. Jesus, this transfiguration, it just means transformed. Jesus was transformed before their eyes. And what they saw, which I wonder what it would have been like for them, maybe like a dream almost, where they're standing there and everything's just happening, and they feel like, when you're watching this movie and it kind of shows how the person is visualizing things, but they can't hear anything, they can't really comprehend what's happening to them. And maybe it was like that, or maybe they heard everything and everything that was happening around them, all their senses were enlightened and in tune at that very moment. But whatever it was, there was something mysterious happening before their eyes that they couldn't fully understand and comprehend. Now, what we see is Moses and Elijah show up as well. And this brings us to some mountaintop experiences that they themselves had. What's interesting that it shows us here is that when Elijah and Moses had their encounters with God on the mountaintop, there was this passing by, because you could not look upon God, or else you would die. And it's just because of how majestic and magnificent his glory is, their physical forms just wouldn't be able to comprehend, to handle it. Not just not comprehend it, but just to be able to endure it. And so, but these guys, God had passed by them and allowed them to see a glimpse of his glory before them. So much so that when it happened to Moses, we see in the Old Testament that with Moses, the radiance of God, the glory of God, just kind of reflected off of Moses, that his face became radiant, and that even when others would come, they couldn't hardly look upon Moses, because his skin his face, everything had become radiant, that he had to wear face coverings as well because of the reflection of God's radiance. But we're not seeing Jesus here reflect God's radiance. He's showing us once again who he is. He's showing us that he is the glory of God. He's showing us that he is God himself. And that Moses and Elijah, now standing here face to face, talking with Jesus, and the disciples having that privilege to look upon him, not just have that glory pass by them, but to have those 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John, witness the glory of God. Now they are seeing everything that has been talked about in the Old Testament finally coming to truth, finally coming to actually happen, to a promise fulfilled. We also know that both Elijah and Moses represent a couple of things here. Now they could, there are speculations here where Moses could be representing the law, and Elijah the prophets, which were 2 very important themes for the Hebrews. So Moses being the lawgiver and Elijah being the prophet, representing all the prophets, though, and so there is that likelihood and possibility. And what we see now with Jesus is that he is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. We also know that there's some eschatological things here. Eschatological is just a fancy word of saying the idea of end times or this understanding of eternal life. What we see is Moses, who had promised that one would come like Moses, and would lead the people of Israel once as Moses led them. So there's this promise that Moses gives in Deuteronomy in his last speech that says somebody will come, and that we know that to be the Messiah. The Jews understood that to be the Messiah as well. Elijah, in fact, actually in Malachi, is told that he is going to come before this to prepare the way. And so Elijah now is standing there with Moses, and the one who is supposed to come is right between them, between Elijah, who's to prepare the way, between Moses, the lawgiver, who says one like him will come to deliver. And we see the two standing on either side now of God's glory, of the Messiah, of Jesus himself. Now, Peter, he decides in this amazing, transcendent moment that, hey, I should say something, which probably was a wrong thing to do. But he's like, I should say something here. I think that we should have, it's so good for us to be here that we don't want to forget this moment. We should actually build maybe like tents as monuments. We don't really know what his thinking was. Maybe building these tents as monuments, maybe each tent for each person because of how holy these guys were. And in one sense, we can think that maybe Peter was elevating Elijah and Moses to the status of Jesus, or maybe we think that he was demoting Jesus to the status of Moses and Elijah, and putting them all on the same ground where Moses and Elijah wouldn't even have done that. They saw Jesus for who he was, but Peter, not only now a little bit confused, not even calling Jesus Messiah or Christ, but referring to him just so simply as Rabbi, just demonstrates how little he understood what was happening in front of him. And wanting to build these tents might not have been a bad thing. Maybe he was recalling the times of Moses, where they would have where the introduction of the festival of booths, of tents, took place. The tabernacle itself being the place where God resided, God's glory resided with the people of Israel. And he thought, well, because we are seeing this amazing thing happen, God's glory being revealed in front of us, and Moses and Elijah, the law and the prophets standing before us right now, we should build a tent for each of them, this tabernacle, so that we can come and reside before God's glory, right here, right on this mountaintop. Who knows what Peter was thinking? In fact, all we know here is he just didn't really know what to say because he was afraid. They all were. For Peter and James and John, it says, he did not know what to say, for they, all of them, they were terrified. So here, this amazing conversation. You're witnessing these three greats talking in front of you. Jesus radiating this light in front of them, his robes, his clothes being transformed completely white, whiter than any whiteness they'd ever seen in the world around them. They have never seen clothes so white before. And they're radiating in front of him. And they're talking to Moses and Elijah. How they recognized who they were, who knows? But they knew this was Moses and Elijah, and he opens his mouth. Well, now something else happens. Something else that just has to baffle them on what's going on. But we see that Peter doesn't get it. Peter still doesn't get it. And we're going to see later he still just doesn't get it. But this cloud comes. The cloud shows up and it overshadows them. We assume that this them simply just means Elijah, Moses, and Jesus, and that the disciples are witnessing this, that they are standing back and they're seeing this cloud in front of them. Or perhaps the cloud did envelop them, but what we can see here is that this cloud overshadowed the three that they were just speaking to and speaks to them. The imagery of this could be related to Jesus' baptism, where this happened before. Except at that time, what we see and believe is that only Jesus and John the Baptist were the ones who witnessed what took place there. But here now, the disciples are brought into a secret even further. The cloud, a voice comes from the cloud and it says, "This is my beloved Son." We've heard that before. In baptism, it said, "This is my beloved Son, whom I am well pleased." And so he says, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." This is the key, I think. This is what stands out to me as I read this. It's that, Peter, shut your mouth and listen. Stop trying to put him into a box and just listen. Stop trying to figure it all out and have everything like every T crossed and every I dotted and doing it in your limited human understanding, and just listen. Just listen. This is my Son, whom I love. Listen to him. Perhaps Peter's thinking this would be a headquarters location for where the deliverance of Israel would begin to be drawn out, to begin to be lived out. That they would have their headquarters for their military operation, this operation he just rebuked Jesus and introduced Jesus to last week. And he's coming and he's saying, "Whoa, guys, I got this great idea. Let's establish this as our headquarters. Or this at least has to be an important place now that we've witnessed what just took place here." And he has all these great ideas to move forward with his understanding of who Messiah is, continuing to forget that the Messiah must suffer. He just saw the Messiah knows all his glory, and he must be hyped up now. He just saw Jesus transformed in front of him. Moses and Elijah show up. What an amazing moment. This is it. This must be the time. The time has come. And we're going to lead the charge. That's what they're thinking. That's what these disciples are getting so excited about now. Even though they're terrified, there's this level of excitement, like, hey, it's good that we're here. We can actually do something now. We can actually, we're here to help. We're like, however you want us to help, we're here. Let's just do it. Let's get this done. And God says, hey, he already told you the plan. He already told you where we must go. This voice out of the cloud speaks and says, you already know. You know that if you are to follow him, that you actually have to deny yourself and pick up your cross. That's the plan. And follow him to that suffering, that rejection, that death, so that you also can rise again. They've been given this amazing opportunity here to witness the glory of God. We can't diminish this amazing reality. They witnessed God's glory. And yet, the Father reminds them here, that glory is also accompanied by the suffering. Paul tells us that if we are to partner with Christ in his suffering, then we will also partner with him in his glory. And Peter, James, and John, they've just been given a glimpse of what is to come. They've been given a glimpse that everything that they were trying to talk Jesus out of before, it doesn't matter, because they've just been given this tiny little picture into what is to come even after all the suffering. But the suffering must take place. This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him. Everything that he said up till now, and everything he's going to say from here on out, listen to him. Listen to him. Remember, we talked about this a few weeks ago, but it also means obey. Don't just hear, but to listen means to obey, observe, live it out, do it. Live out what he says. So when he had talked about forgiving others, when he had talked about loving others, when he had talked, everything he's talked about so far, everything he's going to talk about to come, just listen, just do it. Follow him. Don't just put him in your box. Don't just limit him to your line of thinking. Don't just try to bend him to what you want him to accomplish or what you think is right or what you think is good. Just listen to him. Stop trying to put him in the box. It's not about building this tent to put him in. Now, I want to be careful. I want to help you understand that this tent isn't saying like, oh, this is the institutionalization of Jesus. No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what the box is, although we do that sometimes. But I don't think that's what Peter's trying to do. He's not trying to institutionalize Jesus, but he is trying to understand Jesus only from his limited ability to understand and not open his mind to what Jesus has been saying all along, and not open his mind to the possibilities to come if he were to follow Jesus in the same way that Jesus called him to follow. This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him. Just listen to him. Peter, stop talking. Just listen to him. Now, interestingly here, the disciples, it says here that after this happened, after God had spoken, suddenly looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them but Jesus only. Again, this isn't saying that Elijah and Moses aren't important at all. It's not to say the law and the prophets aren't important at all. It's to say that Jesus, again, the fulfillment of all of that, he's the only one that can deliver you now. He's the only one that can save you now. He's the only one that can go on a cross and die for all mankind, only to be risen again to give us eternal life. Only Jesus can. Moses can't do that for us. Elijah can't do that for us. And nobody like them can do that for us. Only Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God, God himself, can accomplish this. And Jesus has once again revealed himself to the disciples, not just as some other prophet, but as the Son of God and as the one who will deliver, again, not just Israel, in Peter's limited understanding here, but the entire world. Because God so loved that world that he gave his only beloved Son. So, listen to him. As they were coming down the mountain, it says here in verse 9, he charged them to tell no one what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what this rising from the dead might mean. They still don't understand. And so they asked him, "Why do the scribes say that first Elijah must come?" So they're even saying, "We just saw Elijah. Now is the beginning," right? We knew that this is now the beginning. Jesus says, yeah, Elijah does come first to restore all things. And how it is written of the Son of Man that he should suffer many things and be treated with contempt. But I tell you that Elijah has come, and they did to him whatever they pleased, as it is written of him. What is being said here? Well, simply what we see is that Jesus is saying that Elijah has come, and he's talking about John the Baptist preparing the way. In fact, we know now that John the Baptist has died. We read that earlier already. And now with Elijah appearing in front of them, we know that Elijah's work is complete. It's not that Elijah has appeared to begin his work of restoring things, but that he has already come and begun the work of restoring all things. And in doing so, preparing the way for Jesus to come. And so Jesus is saying he's already come. He has. You're right. You seem a little confused right now, but you're right. He has. And he suffered. And I will suffer too. Jesus brings them back here, closing things off. After God just says, listen to him, Jesus brings their attention not back just to Elijah, but back to what he said to them over 6 days ago, that he would suffer. Reminding them their minds are not set on the things of God, but on the things of men. So let's try to not be like Peter, although we do try to put God in a box. And let us listen to him. He's God's Son, whom God loves. So just listen to him. Listen means to obey him. There's a lot of things I don't quite understand, but I know that I have to obey. I have to follow. We're going to see some of those things that he calls us to live out and to obey. But we already know now that that also includes to suffer, to follow in his shoes and endure whatever is thrown at us. So, once again, this is my beloved Son. Listen to him. Let us this week spend time listening to Jesus and what he has called us into as his disciples. God bless your week, and we'll see you whenever.